Zoom. Everything is
Alright. Alright, so right now the only person in the Zoom right now is this room.
okay.
And let's see, is whoever presenting going to be on Zoom or they're going to be in person here?
Sorry.
The everything is set up.
Okay. Thank you.
Because let's see, we don't have mute on entry enabled, so they should be able to hear the room.
Okay. So, Sierra, you're going to present through your laptop or?
It is entirely your choice. I brought both. I brought
Which
my
one?
laptop and I brought a thumb drive.
Which one is easier for you? Do you have a MacBook?
No.
Then try your laptop.
Cool.
It's usually MacBooks that get system problems.
Unfortunately, I think that's the case for basically everything.
Mm-hmm.
Software as well. Let's see what we can swing.
So it's a Surface. I know you have an HDMI port or USB-C.
I have USB-C.
Alright, so see if it likes your Surface.
I love my Surface, so it should.
It's just sharing out that PC. Let me try again. Alright.
Let me see about my own projection settings. So
Gotcha.
let's see, duplicate or extend. Let's see what I go to.
And let me try again.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. I have something else.
Okay.
Where are you? My little bag right here.
Everything.
Why it's not like your service?
This guy's actually new too, so I would have thought if anything it would work pretty well.
Let's see, Windows P. And we're on duplicate.
Oh, you're trying to connect to your computer. Yeah, and if not, I brought a flash drive and we'll copy over that way.
All right, let me test real quick because it might be it's too new and it's giving us issues. Let's see if it'll
Oh,
display
that's
on my
funny.
Dell
What nice things.
because my Dell is a lot older. Yeah, it doesn't like your new Surface.
Nice. Let's go ahead and
Switch for my.
I'll put it on a flash drive then and we'll just do it that way.
Try one more time before we.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna connect to the Zoom from my office and just to make sure everything's going okay from that end.
So, we have someone that hopped on this.
We love the early birds. Shoot, actually. Darn. I didn't save this to a flash drive. And I don't have a USB on here.
Think of a quick solution. Email it to yourself.
I guess I could just log in there. Can you turn this off for a second while I log in? Theoretically.
There we go.
This is a slow computer.
Unfortunately. Come on.
That's really unfortunate that it just won't accept my computer. And then we have the board, because that's always the bigger issue, usually.
What he wants to do.
Please feel free, it's gonna take me a minute to get in through our duo process anyway. Oh wait, what did you do, sir?
I think I figured out. I tried that port instead of that port.
Oh, that's
So it literally just
that's
decided
dumb.
it just wanted one port.
okay.
And try
So yeah,
Do you-
so let's see
let's
how
see.
that works. Genius.
So
So
it
much
does work.
better. Now we know on Mike's super short show. All right. Get out of this. Mayhem. And I am perfectly content.
Right now, let's just do a sound check. Testing, can you see the presentation on Zoom?
Yep.
All right. Should be good to go.
Cool. I do not have access to the Zoom though. If somebody's asking questions on there, would one of you be able to?
Everything. Sierra.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciate that. I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's why I'm connected in my office, so I can monitor the chat and let you know.
Does it sound too loud? Does it sound all right? Okay.
All right, do you want your presentation on all the monitors up front?
I don't think that's necessary.
All righty.
The one thing I was gonna see is if I can show an internet on here, so let me see if I can figure that out. Just in case I wanna go to a website.
Yep, you should be able to, just as long as you don't show any copyrighted material.
No worries, it's fine.
And you have it in extenso, you'd have to, there you go.
Just go over here.
Cool.
Cool. Alright, that is good for me to know. Thank you.
All righty.
Did you guys experience any issues last night with the rain or the hail or anything?
No.
I had students who were here running experiments and I was like, you guys should just go home. It was really bad here apparently.
Is you Stacy?
I am not Stacy. What is it you needed?
Oh, since it's the weekend, if y'all could take the trash to the woman room over here for me, so it won't
Okay.
stay in here over the weekend.
Okay.
Just take that whole trash bag out and just stick it in that little bitty trash bag.
Okay. No problem.
Recording in progress.
I figure give them another minute or two. It's Friday. Things are winding down.
Yeah. Okay. Do a couple of announcements. Okay.
To get started.
Okay. Howdy everyone. I welcome you all to this month's PDA seminar by Dr. Ciara Roser. Before introducing the speaker, I would like to give a couple of announcements. The Texas A&M Health Postdoctoral Association is now accepting applications for the postdoctoral award program, and the PDA offers 2 travel award and 1 professional development award, and the deadline for this is May 5th. On 20th May, there is an exciting professional development workshop presented by Science PhD, a consulting company that prepares academic scientists with business, social, and technical competencies for today's job market, which will be delivered by Zoom. If you are interested in this, please register by May 9. The School of Medicine's Office of Research is accepting applications for Research Excellence Award for postdoctoral fellows, research scientists, and research track faculty. And the deadline for this is May 31st, and for further details, please visit the website. Now, let me introduce today's speaker, Dr. Ciara Roser. Dr. Roser is a postdoctoral research associate in the Department of Neuroscience and Experimental Therapeutics at Texas A&M Institute of A&M University School of Medicine. She received a PhD in behavioral neuroscience from Binghamton University in May 2021. Dr. Roser investigated neurophysiological changes underlying anxiety-like behavior in adolescent mice following prenatal alcohol exposure. As a graduate student, she was actively engaged in outreach and science communication on a local and national level, and received a Graduate Student Excellence Award for service and outreach in 2020. She has continued this outreach in a postdoctoral position, currently serving on 2 national committees for science education and advocacy. Today, she will be sharing how she has embedded outreach into her career as a scientist and discuss the benefits for becoming involved both to you as early career researchers and to the society. With no further ado, I am handing over the floor to Dr. Roser.
Good afternoon, all, and to those of you on Zoom, thank you for being here today. As was mentioned, my name is Ciara, and I am a postdoctoral researcher in the College of Medicine. I come from a background of neuroscience, and since graduate school have engaged in a variety of different outreach opportunities and have really benefited from these opportunities. And so I was really happy to be invited to come and speak and talk about how elements of advocacy and outreach can be not just a moral imperative, but also beneficial to you as you're developing your careers. Please feel free to ask questions throughout over Zoom. We'll catch those at the end, and we will have time for questions. Just to kind of get everybody on the same page about what scientific outreach is, I have 2 definitions that I really like to use. The first definition is that outreach is a collaboration between scientists and members of the public, including those who are involved in education, law, business, social services. But it's also the engagement from scientists that enables learning outside of our immediate working environments, whether that's our clinics or our labs, and it makes our knowledge and discoveries useful beyond the immediate academic community that we're often interacting with more on a day-to-day basis. Although I come from a science background, I have tried to cater this talk such that it will apply to those from medical communities, engineering communities as well, and hopefully I'll be able to convince you of its merit as we move forward. Just to give you a little bit of background on my own qualifications, my own history to speak on the importance of outreach. So I began my PhD in neuroscience in 2015 at Binghamton University in New York. In my 3rd year, I had an opportunity to join a really phenomenal national committee called the Student Science Council with the American Psychological Association. And this is a 2-year position that affords different researchers in graduate programs across the country an opportunity to learn legislative advocacy. And so for 2 years, I would go out to Washington, D.C. twice a year, and I would be informed about scientific policy, and I would learn about bills relevant to the research that I am doing, as well as to funding to major scientific organizations. I also learned how to communicate with lawmakers. So while in my graduate training, I was learning a lot about how to communicate with other scientists. This was really my opportunity to learn how to take my very jargon-heavy ability to communicate science and translate it to not just members of the public, but members of the public who have the ability to provide funding for the science that we are performing. And so this was really kind of my first experience learning how to translate my science communication to someone who wasn't experiencing the same level of rigorous education that I was. And so after this 2-year position and 4 different trips to Washington, DC, the Science Council then had as an opportunity to actually meet with their congressman. And so my first experience doing this was for the Rally for Medical Research in 2020. So to participate in this Rally for Medical Research in DC, you do not have to have any kind of specialized training. And I want to be very clear about that. And I have a list here of the individuals who come out and engage in this kind of advocacy, looking to specifically increase funding for the National Institutes for Health every year. There are scientists, there are students, there are physicians and patient advocates. There are also individuals with their own particular personal experiences with the illnesses that NIH hopes to provide funding to help ameliorate. You also have government relation professionals as well, and lobbyists. And you really don't need to have any particular training to do this. For me though, as a graduate student, I really felt like I valued from being on the council and learning what it was that policymakers really cared about, so that I could make sure that when I was asking them for increased money from the National Institute for Health, I was hitting the things that they also cared about. So an example of this is talking about specifically the kind of research that you're doing in their districts, getting them excited about what you're doing, because then they can subsequently go and brag about what's going on. Also being very clear about how much money we're asking for these bills, where is it going? These were things that I learned how to cultivate with my council experience, but again, not things that you actually need. All you need to be able to do is come and talk about your personal story. So since 2020, I've engaged in over a dozen meetings with Congress members' offices, advocating for different things. The increased funding for the National Institute for Health is one that happens every year. We're constantly in need of more funding for our research projects. But I've also advocated for specific bills. So here's examples of a few. So the Research Investment to Spark the Economy Act. The RISE Act was from 2021, and this was specifically a bill that came out following the pandemic that was intended to supplement funding to those researchers whose work was stalled by the pandemic. And so this was a way to carry out projects that had been funded that were paused and make sure that they came to fruition. And the numbers that you see next to each one, HR and S, are the respective bill numbers for the House and the Senate. The Early Career Researchers Act also came out in 2021, and this was a bill that was specifically intended to create a new fellowship for the National Science Foundation, specifically for people who were just starting out their PI careers. And so this was supposed to be a way of kind of helping you transition beyond your initial startup funds from your institutions. And both of these were bills that I directly got to advocate for, and both of them passed the House and Senate at the end of 2021 and were funded. Most recently, the last congressional meeting I had was this past December with the Congress member from our own district, so from Bryan College Station. I met with the office of District 17's Congress member Sessions, and I was specifically advocating for a bill that's related to the research that I do. So this is the Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Respect Act. All of these bills, by the way, you can look up on congress.gov. You can Google any of these and learn information about them. But this particular bill was meaningful to me because I study fetal alcohol syndrome for a living. I study specifically the changes in the brain that predispose people to having specific symptoms later in life. And so for me to be able to come in from a background of both conceptual knowledge, but also from the background of my lived experience seeing and measuring changes that result from alcohol exposure during gestation is really the power that comes from me being an advocate in these respects. This bill went up to the House once at the end of last year. It did not pass, and so I am continuing to meet with members and advocate for this bill. I'm not going to go much more into my own personal experience just because I really want to go more into talking about the broad range of advocacy and outreach opportunities available and why it's beneficial to partake in them. But if you do want to hear more about this, you're more than welcome to ask at the end of the presentation. Come up and talk to me. I've been doing this now for 3 years, and it's a process that I think kind of mystifies and maybe even mortifies some people. But I found it to be a really rewarding and fulfilling thing to do. So let's switch gears and talk about why, as trainees, we should engage in outreach. I also want to specify that my own personal definition of what a trainee is includes undergraduate students, graduate students, medical students, and postdoctoral researchers. I know that we have PIs and professors who will say they are lifelong learners, but I'm really kind of here today to harness why, particularly in these pre-established fields, it's a really pivotal and beneficial time for us to be engaging in this. This is a topic that I feel very strongly about. I think it is important as scientists and medical professionals that we educate people outside of our disciplines about our research, about the work we do in the clinic. And I feel so strongly about this that I recruited 2 people who I served with on the Student Science Council, and we published about it earlier this year. We applied to write an early career commentary in the journal Neuropsychopharmacology, and the response we received by the editors was fantastically enthusiastic. For those who may want to peek at it later, I put up a QR code. We are scientists, we always cite ourselves, but just in case you would like to reference that later on. But today's talk, I'll be really explicitly addressing things that we brought up in this article more than I was able to. We had an 1,100 word limit on this commentary. And so I'll be digging more into the points that we talk about, specifically why you should engage in outreach. My first point is that it is beneficial to you, and specifically to establishing a career in science to engage in advocacy. To kind of highlight this point, I have taken a blog post from Jackson Laboratory, which is a very prestigious and established research facility, as well as provider for a lot of preclinical models that we use in research. They published back in 2017 an article talking about why we need to be pursuing careers as what they call whole scientists. And this is simply another word for well-rounded scientists. And they specifically talk about how, when looking for careers, postgraduate wise, it is translatable skills that are more frequently used than your laboratory and technical skills in terms of your careers. These translatable skills include management skills, adaptive communication, critical thinking, networking, and leadership. And important for everybody listening today, this is true regardless of the type of career you're pursuing, whether you're going for an academic route or a government-related route, an industry or public service route. These translational skills are the ones that are more frequently used. And importantly for this topic today, advocacy and outreach are very useful for developing these skills. Community outreach, for instance, challenges us to speak about our work to audiences who don't have our specialized knowledge. The same communication skills can be also useful for establishing collaborations with people outside of your immediate field, which can, of course, foster projects and publications, which we're more familiar with recognizing for their immediate benefits on our careers. This also helps to close the gap between basic science and clinical practice. And this is something, as a basic researcher, that I frequently find myself doing. As somebody who uses rodent models in her research, I'm frequently challenged to ask, not just to members of the public, but even at conferences, how does this translate to humans? And engaging in outreach is a great way to start kind of challenging yourself to think about things in that way. It also, I think, allows us to start thinking of our work on a grander scale. For those who are doing a lot of very specific, potentially anatomical level work, it can be very easy to feel like we are completing all of our work within this bubble of our respective workspace, rather than thinking about how it has the greater world impact. And I think that outreach and advocacy are ways for you to do that in an outside the laboratory environment, and in a way that hopefully you'll find inherently rewarding, because you are also going to be educating people. So this point has been seen in multiple journal articles, but I just wanted to particularly highlight the New England Journal of Medicine. They published recently regarding the importance of transmitting medical knowledge with accuracy from the scientific community to the public. Encouraging trainees to share their research through press releases is a form of outreach, and it can make science more accessible to the public, while also increasing the likelihood that your studies will be cited. So this is just a snippet of what is from this particular publication, that articles that were covered by the Times received a disproportionate number of scientific citations in each of the 10 years after those articles appeared. They received on average 72.8% more citations than control articles. How do you necessarily get your articles to these sources is a great question, and one we'll talk about in a couple of slides. We are not generally Times reporters. There is another way in which you can make your articles more accessible. One of those ways is through a resource called Newswise. So Newswise is a database that is specifically designed for scientific and medical reporters. Scientists can write up publicly accessible short statements, about 3 to 5 paragraphs, about research and attach it to an article, so that should a scientific reporter want to write about it, they have something that is a little more friendly toward their general knowledge, and also reduces the likelihood that they may misinterpret your data, which unfortunately happens all too common. I think the last couple of years have really emphasized the perpetuation of misinformation from those without specialized knowledge. And resources like Newswise are a really great way for us to try to help combat that spreading of misinformation. I will also point out that press released papers are more likely to be downloaded and cited. And so this comes from, rather than the Times, the British Medical Journal. And I just pulled out a table from a publication. This was, I believe, general scientific publications, medical science publications. And they talk about how those articles that received press releases versus those that didn't had about double the visits on their website, almost triple the downloads, and more than double of the citations. And so this really does go to show that basically, unsurprisingly, the more eyes that have access to your work, the more likely you are to be cited. But I think also goes to show that the more people who can understand your work, the more likely it is to be perpetuated as well. So besides Newswise, I wanted to highlight, although it is a bit contentious right now, that social media is also a way of getting your research out there. Twitter and academic Twitter has been pretty much since the beginning of my graduate career really encouraged for its ability to disseminate research, particularly related to your own respective subfields. I have found that to be the case. But more than that, there is data to show, and I'm just showing an example from medical journals. This has been shown in engineering and basic science journals as well. There has been qualitative research to show that tweeting does in fact improve citations. Again, I think this all is generally associated with the idea of getting your research out beyond your immediate networks. The more eyes who see it are potentially going to cite it. I think that Twitter also has the potential of improving your networking abilities as well. But in terms of just citation numbers, there is inherent benefit. And the fact is that communicating your work through social media is still a form of outreach. And it's a very accessible one for a lot of us. It doesn't necessarily require a lot of money. Just as a more colloquial example that is accessible to us, this facilitates career advancement. So going on to our second reason why as scientists we should engage in outreach. It is the more moral fact that engagement improves perceptions of research and it promotes public trust of scientists. And I promise I would not say this without being able to cite my sources. There exists a reciprocal relationship between scientists, policymakers, and the public. And although academic research is often perceived to be kind of detached from public interests, that really isn't the case. In the past year alone, our federal government appropriated $165 billion toward research and development. And science funding is a particularly critical area in which science and government interplay. And science policy can and does dictate the prioritization of certain areas for funding and the attention of stakeholders and members of the public. All that to be said, despite the influence of federal policy on science, the majority of federal lawmakers do not come from scientific backgrounds. They come from specifically backgrounds in law or business. So legislators are reliant on advocates and lobbyists to direct their attention and to direct their resources. Those who make up the most powerful and well-funded US lobbies are not scientists. They are defense contractors and oil companies, churches and banks. And so communication between us, those doing the research, and lawmakers is what facilitates a stronger understanding of prioritizing science and bigger picture issues. And as I mentioned before, this is also what allows us to challenge myths, misunderstandings, and mistrust in science. There is a very real effect of helping the public better understand our research. As described in this Science Advances article, members of the public who are scientifically literate are better able to manage the criticisms, nuance, and the uncertainty that is inherent in active scientific progress. And we as researchers have a responsibility to disseminate federally funded research to taxpayers. So this was recently highlighted at the end of 2022 by the President's administration and their policy to make taxpayer-funded work freely available to the public immediately upon publication. This actually was just making the round on Twitter this past week as the government's trying to figure out how to actually uphold this. How do we make this freely available? And last I saw, one of the current ideas was that as soon as an article was accepted, it should be freely available on services like PubMed. But they're still frankly working out exactly how they're going to carry out this direct. And while increasing the access to our articles is of course an important part of fulfilling this, so is interpreting and translating the results. Which will allow us to foster public trust. And all of that is possible through different forms of outreach and advocacy. This is a citation that I was very, very happy to find. It was determined that in terms of general members of the public, scientists are considered one of the most trusted professions in society. Perhaps unsurprisingly, beating out the politicians themselves. And scientists' continued engagement with the public is important for maintaining that trust. So this one I really want to particularly highlight and talk about through my own personal experience rather than citing prior research. And that is this notion that reaching out and communicating to non-scientists promotes confidence and feelings of well-being. Trust in the public does in fact extend to graduate students, medical students, and postdoctoral fellows who often experience feelings of inadequacy and imposter syndrome within their respective departments. But in reality, trainees are budding experts in their field. They often have years of hands-on experience, publications, master's degrees, and all of these are seen to provide justification for your value as a trustworthy source of information, particularly when you communicate firsthand experience. Further, if you're engaging in legislative advocacy such as myself, the fact is you are a constituent with voting power. And so in addition to having firsthand experience to talk about when you are trying to advocate for funding for, let's say, the NSF or the NIH, you can also have sway in the fact that you have the ability to influence your districts through communication with your elected officials. I really, really like this citation. I try to bring it up in any time I give talks on this because it is a study that was particularly looking at research-focused STEM departments across the United States, Canada, and they were looking at factors that contribute to senses of belonging within our fields. In order for universities to recruit and maintain diverse scientific workforces, we have to employ strategies that improve trainee self-confidence, as well as their abilities as scientists. And according to this survey, women and members of historically excluded racial and ethnic groups are more likely to lack confidence and that sense of belonging, and to cite it as their reasons for leaving academia. Engaging in outreach and advocacy is one of the ways that we can potentially address and try to close this gap, because these activities provide trainees with a sense of community and the feedback that their work and their expertise are valued. So just to kind of give a more personal example of this, in my congressional meetings, talking about my own research, first, I was never questioned. Even as I was pre-PhD about my credentials or my ability to speak on this. Once I began talking about it and communicated my experience, that never came up. What did come up and what I have experienced in my meetings is that there is a lot of knowledge that I gained without conscious awareness. And it was truly surprising to me communicating with non-scientists what I took to be fairly common knowledge, which in fact was not. In one particular meeting with a congresswoman from New York, I was speaking about fetal alcohol syndrome and just very casually stating things like alcohol crosses the placental barrier. And the congresswoman interrupted me and said, I didn't know that, despite the fact she herself had been pregnant and had children. And I can't tell you when I learned that. I don't remember learning that, but that to me was such a well-known thing within my department. And it was this great reminder of again, this bubble that we live in where we feel like everyone around us is so much smarter than us. And therefore, all the knowledge we have, the people around us have. And stepping outside of our labs and our clinics to provide this knowledge is also a great reminder of how much you have grown and how much knowledge you have gained, even when you weren't necessarily aware of it. This was also particularly helpful around the time in which my dissertation experiments were taking off and they suddenly stopped working. And there was no logical reason why they stopped working. And besides just daydreaming about quitting my PhD program and pursuing a non-scientific career, engaging in outreach was my reminder that I still had value as my data were not being collected. And that I was still an influential member of the community, which was very helpful because my experiments did eventually work again. And so for those who ever feel like they're at a standstill with respect to the work that you're doing, I feel like this outreach really provides a break to your own self-esteem, as well as potentially being really fun, which is where I'd like to direct our talk next, is talking about the fact that there are tons of outreach and advocacy opportunities. And there are ways for anybody who wants to participate. I want to draw attention to this Frontiers article from last year, which was looking at what motivations people within science research settings have to engage in outreach and what barriers may stop them from doing so. First of all, I'll take this quote, which found that 40% of graduate students and less than a fifth of postdoctoral fellows engage in outreach on a regular basis. It's pretty low. Fortunately, the researchers asked students and postdocs, why didn't you, or why don't you engage? And they cited three really important and relevant barriers. The first of which is, ain't nobody got time for that, which is always present. We have so much that we are expected to do, and I'm up here telling you, you can do more. And it is absolutely reasonable for you and good for you to be managing your time. I do hope that I'll be able to convince you through some of the examples I have coming up that there are opportunities that do not take a considerable amount of time. Some of them can be a single day of the semester, or less than 10 hours throughout the year. There are opportunities that can fit into your schedule if they are what you value. A lack of funding, absolutely reasonable constraint. That said, there are a fair bit of opportunities that do provide funding, and again, I'll be referencing those coming up. Organizations, the societies that are a part of your respective disciplines and universities will provide funding for this. The last is the lack of awareness about opportunities available to them. So outreach and advocacy are not explicitly rewarded within academic structures, and so it can be hard to find the opportunities that are available to you. I'd like to think and hope that there are going to be changes towards these elements being rewarded more, particularly as we know that service is an expectation within academic and non-academic circles. That said, because it is not as explicitly rewarded as, say, publications or data collection or grant acquiring, I think that you really kind of have to do your own searching. And part of what my co-authors and I tried to do, at least for our community and the neuropsychology community, was we created a repository of opportunities for them. And most of these will be psych and neuro related, but there are some that are not that I just wanted to go ahead and highlight for you all today. So let me see if I can pull that up. Doing some neck stretching here. Okay. So this was linked in the article that I previously mentioned earlier. And we had collated this through a submission form as well as through our own knowledge of opportunities. What are we up to right now? Oh, 47, nice. Different opportunities, and we use this wonderful site called Airtable, which allows people to then subsequently filter the opportunities based upon what is relevant to them. So for instance, you could filter by eligibility. So let's say that you are a PhD student. If you select this, it will only provide opportunities that are available to PhD students. Let's say you don't feel like you have the time to do an in-person option, you really need something that is remote or virtual. You can also, you could also select the option of only virtual opportunities, and then these are funneled for you. And so we had different categories of opportunities. Like I said, I'm not going to go over all of them, and unfortunately some of them are discipline specific. I'm sorry for that, but the journal that was willing to publish us is neuro and psych specific, so we did have to cater it there. But I figured I could highlight a couple opportunities that are available to medical students, scientists, engineers alike. One of, I think, the ones that is most popular among my circles is Letters to a Pre-Scientist. Have any of you in the room heard of this one before? So this is a pen pal program that is available to scientists and medical professionals, and they will match you with middle schoolers across the country, usually from backgrounds of lower socioeconomic status or those without necessarily the advantages of getting to learn about these things from direct experience. And through this program, you can provide your specialization, and they will match you to a student who is interested in that. And you write 4 letters a year. It is very manageable. You can get very creative with these as well. I didn't include them, but I have pictures. A lot of my friends will include stickers, pictures of them in their hazmat suits and in their lab coats and things like that. And it's just a way to really kind of open up children's mind about what it is a scientist does. I can tell you, as a first generation student, I did not have an idea of what a scientist did in middle school, and I think I would have loved to have engaged in this program if it existed. And you can sign up through their website to be matched. I believe sign up occurs over the summer, so we're right about the time in which you could sign up for that. SciComm Bites and SciPol Bites. There's actually a lot of these. The sub-branch of Bites. These are blog sites in which you can write articles about your research and publish them. Again, kind of like a news-wise element, but they can be cited. And in fact, people who have written for Bites have been cited before. Always trying to improve our citation numbers where we can. So this is an opportunity for you to talk about your specialization in research, even talk about issues that matter to you. And if your topic is selected, I think most of the bites are only 750 words. So it can be a challenge to talk about your work in that amount of space, but this is something that they're doing on a rolling basis. They're always accepting new articles. And so if this is a way that you want to reach out, this is something you do on your own time when you can. Skype a Scientist is somewhat similar to the Letters to a Pre-Scientist, but this is usually a one-time thing where you will Skype or Zoom. They use Zoom more now, but this was invented back when Skype still existed. And this is you zooming in and talking about your work to classrooms across the country, across the world. Again, just a great way of doing outreach. If you're really interested in that K-12 outreach, a really wonderful opportunity. You sign up, you provide your specialization, and classroom teachers will reach out to you and express their interest in having you come and speak. There are also training and professional development programs as well. I'm not going to go too much over these except to say that if you are interested in learning more about legislative advocacy and science policy, these programs are A+. They really help you to feel more confident about your ability to speak politician. And I know several people who have experienced these in case any of you were interested and wanted to connect with them. Let's see. There are also actually internships and fellowships that allow you to be paid. So for those of you who were worried about funding, all the opportunities we have provided here, we specifically provided because they were not at any cost to you. And some of these fellowships and internships are actually additionally supplemented with pay, and you can likewise select and learn more about them. Not all of these opportunities, as I said, are going to be relevant to you all. I think a really good resource for finding these opportunities, though, is through the conferences that you attend on a regular basis. The Society for Neuroscience is the predominant one within my field, and they have a whole category on their website about outreach. I'll list a couple more, though, that I think are particularly relevant for us and for people within Texas. So judging for science fairs is easily one of the most accessible and I would argue fun and enlightening outreach opportunities that I've gotten to engage in. They just did this last month. It was at Texas A&M. And I think they're starting to do that more every year here, where different schools, middle and high schoolers throughout the state come and do a massive science fair, and they're always looking for judges. This is really just a great day to talk to young people. And I thought I'd experienced imposter syndrome until last year when I was talking with a middle schooler, an 8th grader, and he was explaining to me how he had written code to optimize MRI imaging at a local hospital in his town. And it's just a phenomenal experience. And like I said, it only takes a day for those of you who are concerned about time and travel. And so I have the barcode here for those of you who want to sign up. You can receive alerts for next year when they're looking for judges. But it means a lot to children to get to have the expertise of those who are doing the work. For those who may want to do some writing, but want to stay a little bit more local, our university, and specifically our health center, has a writing team. So our science and health writing team receives submissions through an accomplishment form. This accomplishment form can share anything from publications to awards, really anything that we would like to highlight from members of the university. And subsequently, our writing team interviews and publishes on the vital record about these particular stories. I have written 2 of these so far. We have really great people who can help you with writing accessibly about research that is being done, about the translational relevance of this work. I've had a great time with it. And if you are interested in joining, you get to do this on your own time again. For those concerned about time elements, generally they will reach out to the team and ask who wants to write about this, given your particular expertise and your available time. And this is just a rolling thing as well. If you're interested, great way. I have these listed on my CV as well, and I'll show you how I do that in just a minute. I also don't want you to feel constrained by pursuing avenues that are already established. And so I wanted to highlight this particular form of outreach. It was from the Graduate Student Association at the University of British Columbia. This was the collaboration of a handful of students who wanted to make neuroscience more accessible by turning it into cartoons. This is neurohistory cartoons. And they have gone on to present this and publish this and share this in classrooms. And I think it is just a wonderfully creative way to engage in educating the public. It is outside of my wheelhouse. I have no artistic inclination myself, but for those of you who do, this kind of work, I think is a great way of engaging in something that is meaningful to you, that exhibits your talents, and is hopefully fun. You can look up all of their wonderful cartoons. They have a whole website just listing what they have put together. So I've talked about the benefits of outreach and the different types of outreach that you can potentially engage in. And I just wanted to make sure to touch upon how do you leverage these opportunities, because this is something that unfortunately happens all too commonly. People will engage in an outreach day at a local school, or they will take part in a committee within the university, the graduate school, student organization, postdoctoral association, and they won't put it on their CV. Although this is leadership and service opportunities that, regardless of where you go forward, will make you stand out and will be taken into consideration very favorably, because you are showing the ability to work with other people, to use adaptive communication. Again, all those translatable skills we talked about before. And there's no real one way that you should list these any more than there's only one way that a CV should be listed. So I'm just going to show you a couple examples of what I have seen. And I would advise, if you have not already put this on your CV, to do so, or to add a section of this and to think back as much as you can. Although, as always, it's better to update things as soon as you do them so you don't forget. The you cannot go wrong example is just to add a section on outreach and community service. Mention any volunteering committees. If you have served in any leadership position, list this as well. And you can just highlight this all in one section and call it a day. You are fine. That was from an example of a postdoc who had sent me her CV for this talk. She's an engineer. This came from a postdoctoral physicist who I knew, who kind of broke down this section. It's still all together, but put it into subcategories. So highlighting service and leadership separately from outreach activities. And this is a way, again, you kind of think of leadership as a buzzword, of being able to highlight specifically here is where I was exhibiting my leadership potential versus here were things that I partook in but did not necessarily lead, versus separating that from professional associations of outreach, including AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, also a great place to look. Their website has a ton of outreach and fellowship opportunities available to them. So if you feel inclined to break it up in this way to make it a little bit easier for people to see how you were engaging, super. And then you can go ham like I do, which is on my CV, I kind of listed all over the place. So I have my leadership roles at conferences separated from when I've been invited to go and talk at other universities or institutions. I have committee memberships listed separately. And then since I had mentioned writing for the health writing team, this is where I have a section separated from my peer review publications on service and outreach publications. And so this is where I put down writing for the vital record. This is also where I've put down writing in the past for newsletters and journals. I think one of my favorite ones that I wrote was during the pandemic. I had done a lot of reading on how COVID-19 and the pandemic was negatively impacting particularly women and gender minorities from being able to continue their careers in science. And I worked with a colleague of mine and we wrote up an article that's actually been cited a couple times now. And just basically keeping all of that separated. And you do not have to go to this level by any means. I'm just really trying to highlight the idea that there are multiple ways that you can show this off about yourself. And I think that it would actually be very smart to consider who is reviewing your CV at any given time when determining how much you're going to share. I know that I have also put in a couple of sentences about my outreach work when I apply for major awards, like travel awards for conferences. Although they love hearing about your research, sometimes adding in a little bit about what you're doing within your community or on a national level can really make you stand out apart from your colleagues. I also included those sentences when applying for the postdoctoral travel award here, where they specifically ask you, how are you engaging with the community? And so these are things not only to document, but to remember to mention as you're applying for things, because you are once again showing yourself off as a well-rounded scientist and a well-rounded academic. So that concludes the talk I had prepared for today. I want to thank you all for taking time on a Friday to come and listen to this, and I would be more than happy to take any comments or questions you have. Thank you so much.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Hi, I am Bhuvaneshwaran. I am a postdoc research fellow. I would like to know that how significantly these outreaching means programs contribute for our career.
Great question. So I can at least share my own personal experience with benefiting careers. As I mentioned prior, a lot of environments postgraduate really value you having the translational skills you develop with outreach. But I can tell you, my experience with outreach, so first serving on the Student Science Council, was where I met the co-authors for the publication I just had in neuropsychopharmacology. So right away, full circle outreach benefiting my career, it got me a publication. It also improves networking, meeting people outside of your immediate area, which I hate that I perpetuate this, but who you know has a great impact on your careers. And so the more people you're meeting outside of your immediate circle can benefit you career-wise. But my outreach and advocacy has also really made me stand out. I was invited to join 2 national committees for outreach and advocacy. One is a Science Education Committee on Alcohol Research. The other one is a governmental advocacy committee, and I meet with them once a month. And we talk about different outreach programs, ways of communicating with congressional members as well as with community members. A really big part of the Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Respect Act that I'm advocating for now is educating foster parents about this syndrome, because members of the foster population are overwhelmingly demonstrate higher rates of fetal alcohol syndrome. So being able to take the knowledge that we have from our research and then apply it has provided me the opportunity to meet with people who I would have said were far more advanced in their careers than I was, who talk to me and treat me like an equal, which is, you can hear my imposter syndrome coming out a little bit. It's incredible. I will also say that I was selected to give this talk for a conference in June, and I got a science education award that provided several thousands of dollars. And so in another respect, all of this work has also just led to me receiving an award and the ability to share this further, and likewise a little bit of a personal benefit, which is lovely. Never what we seek, but always lovely. I have found it to just be really meaningful, and I guess I should have reiterated, however you find balancing your time is right for you. I have engaged in these activities for almost 5 years now, while also writing 2 fellowship grants for the NIH and publishing and teaching, and I don't necessarily know how I did it, but I found ways to make it work, and I hope that any benefits you receive from it will be worth the time that you put in. But you should never feel pressured. I think that a lot of advocacy's benefits are that you can find ways to engage that are enjoyable for you. And I think even though that's not necessarily an implicitly career-based reward, getting to feel good about the knowledge we have, I think, is rewarding and meaningful, especially for pushing through our training programs.
Thank you.
Very informative talk. My question is all along this journey, how supportive your mentor was for all these things? Should he ask for permission?
Awesome question. So my PI was not happy when I told him I was going to be leaving the lab and going to Washington, D.C. this year. His graduate program had not explicitly encouraged outreach and advocacy. It actually took me having my co-mentor, who did come from that environment, and explained it to my PI and said, no, this is a really good opportunity. And it has been, for all the reasons that I just said. And now that same PI, who is a little bit hesitant, actually does high school outreach. And so I think that if your mentor has any hesitancies, my personal recommendation is find a mentor who doesn't. Find somebody who's willing to go to bat for you, but also be sure that you can explain the benefits of this. So I had to go to my mentor and say, this is going to be an opportunity for me to learn more about how my research applies to the world, and the greater picture of it, which you need to write grants, by the way. A lot of grants, major organization grants, specifically have significant sections where you have to talk about real world application. This specifically helps you to understand that. I also had to assure him that these visits would not in any way impede my progress and establish goals. So it is not uncommon for mentors to have a wariness about you engaging in activities out of the lab or clinic. I don't think that should stop you from pursuing it. But if you can find somebody else who can have your back and support that, it's a really great question. My gentle fighting back, though, I think has really worked out. Yes.
One more question.
Please.
For writing a grant as a researcher, the first need for writing a grant is to identify the problem in the existing field, and then comes incorporate our expertise in that solution in the problem to provide a solution, and then comes a preliminary data that we generate for writing a proposal. So this outreaching, how do we include this outreaching in writing a proposal or a grant?
Well, everything you spoke of is correct, but it is only part of the research plan component of the grant. So a lot of training grants also include training plan components. So if we're talking about the NSF GRFP, if we're talking about NIH fellowships, so I had an F31, I have an F32. The second half of this is all about training and the training that you're going to receive. And I specifically wrote into mine that part of my training was going to be scientific advocacy. And I specifically outlined goals of how I was going to do that. And then I was able to embed these and follow up with them with progress reports, as you have to do, and say, I did these things. I met with these Congress members, or I started a committee with other graduate students, a form of outreach. Starting committees is wonderful. We started a Women in Science and Academia committee with my university so that we could talk about gendered issues related to progress within science, specifically for women and gender minorities. And being able to say that those were goals as part of my training plan, and then to say I fulfilled them, absolutely pivotal. That training plan portion, by the way, should oftentimes be a couple of sentences in your overall summary as well. For training grants and for us as trainees, they want to be able to see you're doing things outside of your research, like 90% research, 10% other things. But yes, you can cultivate those. And if you're interested in hearing more about it, I can certainly talk to you about it. I'll also be they're doing the Aggie F Boot Camp here, and I'll be speaking on the training plan in June. And I can show examples of how you can put that in and leverage that in your favor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sierra, I have a question from Zoom. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can.
Stephanie Wilson said, great talk, thank you. In line with what you just mentioned, how can we begin to help cultivate departmental organizational environments that encourage or even incentivize community outreach as regular practice?
Wonderful question. My limitation here is that I did this as a graduate student at a different organization or a different institution. I can tell you what I did. Which was we put together a proposal for the committee or the work that we wanted to do. Whether that was, we started a brain awareness day within our town, which was an entire day of kind of crafty activities to do with children at a local community center. It was majorly successful. Like very, very simple, fun activities. And we put together an explicit proposal of this is what we want to do. It would take this much money and this much time, and here's going to be involved, and here's the oversight we need. And we brought it forward to our department head. And there was a bit of a back and forth there. But this is something that has now been going on for 6 years. So I think that like with approaching anybody who's very logically minded, it's a really good idea to have a plan in place. And if you can really, again, find a faculty member who really cares about it to back you. Because while we are budding experts, it's important for us to recognize that we do not have the established knowledge that necessarily those superior to us have. Having their backing can mean a lot. And so those are my recommendations. Lay things out with painful clarity. And if that's something you decide that you're interested in, if I can be in any way helpful, I have old examples of what we used to do. First, when forming the Women in Gender and Academia Committee, and then with doing the Brain Awareness Day, I would be happy to help. But that's a wonderful thing to do, by the way, because you can facilitate the engagement of other people around you too by starting that committee, not to mention showing off your leadership.
Your meeting has ended.